Everyone. I'm Warden Darren White from Dufferin County, and I'm joined today by Sonya Pritchard, who is the CAO, Chief Administrative Officer of the County of Dufferin. Sonya's job is to make sure, basically to make sure everything happens. She's in charge of the entire county organization. It's her job to make sure things get done. She answers directly to council, and I do have to say she does a fantastic job of it as well. She's a great person to have in that office and does a really good, solid job, and we're very happy with her. We're glad to have you here today, Sonya, and we'll talk a little bit about COVID-19, sort of where the county goes and whatnot. So let's start with this. Why don't you give us a little brief description of how staff are doing, what work has looked like in the county perspective over the last few months, and how things are sort of generally going with the staff.
Thanks, Warden White. I'm really happy to be here chatting with you today. And as you know, and I hope people who have tried to access county services know, we're still here. Services are still available and staff are working, but in different ways. We've adapted really well to working remotely, and for staff who are not working remotely, to modifying the way we work, like having to implement enhanced cleaning in our facilities and staggering work schedules, ensuring our outside workers maintain physical distancing, and of course, enhancing infection control and screening in long-term care at Dufferin Oaks. Some areas, like the early on centers and the museum, are closed as a result of the provincial orders. But even these services are being provided to some extent online, and we're continuing to support clients in the early on area. Some staff from those areas have been redeployed, or some have been put on declared emergency leave. Some of our redeployed staff have been able to provide invaluable assistance at Dufferin Oaks in HR, climate change, and with communications. And I think it's important to note that regular communications with staff and the community have been a key part of the work that we've been doing over the last 2.5 months.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's really important because there are a lot of folks out there from my travels who don't realize that we're still operating more or less at mainly full capacity. All of our programs are still happening. All of our, garbage still gets picked up. All that kind of thing still happens. Just differently in many cases, but if you call the county office, somebody's going to answer the phone, and if you need service from community services or waste services or wherever, those inquiries are going to still be dealt with, just differently for now. So it's good to know. Thanks for that information.
And how do you feel council's working with our virtual council meetings?
Well, I think it's been a bit of a challenge. I think it's something we sort of were evolving to in the process over the last year or so. The provincial government has sort of made exceptions for that in the Municipal Act, but I think we're thrust into it really quickly. I think we're adapting well. I think people are getting used to the new normal, but it has its challenges. Council work, a lot of the work behind the scenes from committees and whatnot, it's very social work. A lot of things get done by a bunch of people sitting across the table and having frank discussions. And it's a little bit harder to do virtually, but, I think we're muddling through. You add to that different levels of council sort of are, some are struggling with what kind of work gets done while we're in this and what should wait until after we come out the other side. But I don't know. I think this is the norm for the short and the medium term for sure. The long term, I guess, still remains to be seen. So when we talk about the long term and when we talk about the other side of the fence and recovery and whatnot, and I think, I don't know that recovery is a great word to use for it. It sounds like we're coming out of a car accident. So why don't we use something like moving forward? So moving forward, what do you think the next steps are going to be, and what is it going to look like?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't think any of us have really specific answers, but we're doing our best to try and figure it out. And from the looking at county services from a staff perspective, we are currently evaluating priorities and looking at what services really do require and benefit from person-to-person interaction rather than online service. And we'll be putting together a workforce strategy for council to consider. And the strategy will look at the work we're doing, how we're doing it, keeping in mind that we'll likely be dealing with COVID-19 for 18 to 24 months, as public health has been telling us. And it makes sense to ensure that we're creating a sustainable work environment and that we're taking advantage of the lessons that we've learned since the beginning of the pandemic. So practically speaking, that does likely mean that we will continue to have some staff working remotely and that we will continue to provide as many services as possible virtually or online. And we will need to continue to ensure that we are maintaining physical distances in whatever work environment we're in, and making sure that we're not having all of our staff congregating at once or coming back to the workplace all at once, so that from a business continuity perspective, we're ensuring that if a single team member becomes ill, that we're not infecting a large group of people. So all of those things need to be taken into consideration. On the economic development front, Darren Keeney is working as our moving forward officer, and his work, he's working with a newly formed task force, which you are a part of. And so how do you think the task force is going, and what's it working on?
Well, I think our first meeting we held last week, it went really well. We have a couple of local council members. We have some stakeholders, people from the Dufferin Federation of Agriculture, a few other local farmers who have big operations, a couple of small. I think it went, really well. And I think right now we're sort of trying to establish where exactly the bottlenecks are and what the challenges specifically are when it comes to a rural recovery, when it comes to, getting those products back out to market and getting things back to a little bit more normal. And but I think we have the right people at the table, and I think as we move forward with these meetings, we're going to be able to put together a lot of really great information, which will not only help us to move forward after this, but will help us in a general economic development sense as well. So we'll be able to hit two birds with one stone, so to speak. So I really look forward to the work that comes out of that, and I think we're off to a really great start. So let's talk about COVID going forward. Second wave. I know we had a presentation from Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health a couple of weeks back at our council meeting. What do you think that looks like as we move forward into the future, into the rest of the summer, the fall? Second wave or no? How do we adapt? How do we deal with it? What are your thoughts?
I think putting together our workforce strategy and being flexible, being able to sort of change our response and use again the lessons that we've learned over the last several weeks will certainly prepare us to be able to continue providing services. In addition, we have been working with various partners, Ontario Health, Headwaters Healthcare, Public Health, to update the pandemic plan and to make sure that, again, those things that we've seen over the last while are incorporated into the plan, and that we have measures in place that will help us deal with things like PPE, the need to coordinate resources, and most importantly, I think, to communicate well with staff members, partners that provide services to the vulnerable sector and to the public. And having those things set up and ready to go ahead of time will allow us to respond faster should there be a second wave, and hopefully provide a better sense of continuity going forward.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, and I know we know that this is a really challenging time. I mean, just COVID by itself, but now you add to it the unrest in the States, which is sort of spreading into Canada a little bit, the renewed calls for action on racism and segregation and disenfranchisement of different groups. You know, you add into that, it's summertime and nothing is the same. And, it sort of puts pressure on people and puts their mental health into question. And I mean, it's a very challenging time. And a lot of us, and myself included, are sort of, don't worry, it's not going to happen to me. I'm going to be fine. But as I mentioned in some of our senior meetings recently, I had a day where I basically had to shut off. I tuned out. I just couldn't do it anymore. I guess cumulatively things caught up to me, and I needed a good 24-hour reset. So I think mental health is a very important topic right now as well, and people need to realize that they have to look after each other, look after themselves. They have to be cognizant of the fact that there's nothing wrong with reaching out and asking for some help. I know that the county has some programs in place to help staff, because I can only assume if I'm feeling that, and the staff that are really out there on the front lines are feeling it twice as much or more. So give me a primer on sort of what we do to help staff and services that are available in that area.
Certainly. And I think recognizing upfront that this is a really difficult time for everyone, staff, partners that we work with, clients that we serve, members of the community, is important. And it's always beneficial to just take a moment and say to yourself, if you're having a bad day, you know what, it's not a great day for me, but maybe it's not a great day for someone else either. And just sort of having that compassion and dealing with people kindly is probably the best first step. But we also have a number of formal supports in place to help county staff. We are very fortunate to have a robust employee and family assistance program that has been really quick to enhance and modify the supports available and to make them very specific to some of the challenges that people are dealing with around COVID-19. Through that program, our staff have access to counselors through email or chat or over the phone should they need it. We also try and provide other information and other online support services to staff so that they have options should they want to take advantage of those. And we also try to support our staff with regular team meetings, with either virtually for remote staff or using physically distanced meetings for those staff still in the workplace. And we encourage staff to ask questions and share their experiences, because that conversation in itself is usually very helpful. But again, we try and promote using those supports that are available to staff. And we've also tried to make information available to members of the public about some of the resources that are available, either through the federal government, through the Wellness Together Canada program, and information that's been shared through Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health. But it's tough. It's tough on everyone. And as you said, you had a day where things kind of caught up with you. And I think me too. I had one of those days not that long ago. And I think everybody has had those days. And we just need to support each other. And I will say we have a great team here. And I feel very grateful to be able to work with them and to you and the other members of council. And it gives me hope going forward that we will get through this and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's the great thing about the human race. We always seem to manage to find a way to come out the other side, hopefully better than we went in. And it's important for people to realize that while we can't touch, it's important to keep in touch. And so thanks very much for chatting with me today. Is there anything else you wanted to add on the end of the conversation before we leave?
I think I said it all, but again, I do want to thank all of the members of the county staff for the great work that they've been doing over the last, it's almost 3 months. It's hard to believe, but I'm impressed every day with the amount and the quality of work and just the general sense of duty and caring that our staff have.
Yeah, and I agree, and certainly pass along my thanks and the thanks of council and the rest of the residents of the county to all of our staff who do such a fantastic job every day. I know many of them, for example, in Dufferin Oaks, have had more of a challenge than some of us, and they've really stepped up and risen to that challenge. I know we have people from the museum who've gone into the Dufferin Oaks as volunteers to help out, and they've done it with a smile on their face and done a great job. And that's a credit to our organization. It's a credit to your leadership, I think, and a credit to the great people we have working for us. So make sure to pass along my thanks to the residents for a job well done for everybody. And hopefully at some point we'll be able to get together again over a barbecue in a backyard somewhere or at the ambulance center, and we'll go from there. So thank you, Sonya, for chatting with us today, and we'll talk soon.